Okay, I'm going to show you a fun technique to use the Decorative Enamels die set. I'm not going to use the large one. I'm just going to use the smaller one. And this is a mailer that I got from Alta New. And it's a bubble mailer. You can use any kind of mailer. It doesn't have to be an Alta New one. However, this one happens to be very pretty, so I'm glad that I get to reuse it in a way. And I'm just going to cut a strip so that it's about the same size as the die that I'm using. And you lay it on your platform, your die cutting machine platform, and then you put your paper on top of that and the die. And oops, I did not have this set up right, so let me start over again. You follow the recipe for your die machine. This happens to be a Spellbinders from scrapbook.com, so it's black, but it's this regular Spellbinders Platinum 6. And so it goes whatever your sandwich is, and then the bubble mailer, the paper, which it happens to be cardstock. I think it's Hammermill 110 probably. And then the die, my last plate, crank it through. You can hear all the little bubbles popping in there. And you can use that a few times. What I try to do usually actually is I normally would have a number of dies lined up along here so that I can do a bunch at once. But just for purposes of this, I have this one, and you do it twice. So you end up with two pieces, and they are very delicate looking, really beautiful dies. And they, normally you would use them on cards, maybe in scrapbooking, other flat, two-dimensional type projects. But I'm going to kind of step it up a little bit. So here is the die cut, and you take two of those and you glue them together. I have found that the Barely Art Precision Craft glue works really well because it does have that really tiny tip, or if you have another kind of liquid adhesive with a tiny tip, that is very helpful. So you glue two of them together, and that's what this looks like. It's really not very noticeable whether you have one or two, but you can feel it gives it a little bit extra stability. And the reason why we want it a little bit deeper is because we are going to make like a little trough in between. So what I did, and I did this beforehand so I could have it all done, is I traced out some of the shapes in here so that I could figure out what I was going to color, which color. And I'm using alcohol markers. These happen to be Alta New's 12 colors that are the D set. So they look like that. And I am going to use B815, probably use B714, R603, and I'll use R614. So those four colors. But what I wanted to do was, so that I know what was what, I ended up just kind of making some, with a pencil, I just kind of went around and kind of figured out, traced out those shapes, because I want it to look like stained glass when I'm done. So the idea is, on the outer part, I am going to color with the two different colors of green. On the very inside part, I'm going to color it the lighter pink, and then the darker part's going to be these like petal-like things. So I'm going to color that real quick. I'm going to speed it up so you don't have to watch the whole thing, and I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, so when you figure out that you've colored the whole thing in kind of the way that you want to, and you saw me probably trying to make sure that I was getting the right colors in the right places, and obviously this is a very sloppy coloring job, but that's okay. Then what you're going to do is you're going to use your regular glue. And as I said, I was using this precision craft glue from Embellie Arts, and I do really like this little very thin tipped metal nib that's on there because it makes it very simple to glue intricate things down without making a big sloppy mess, which is kind of what I end up usually doing with glue. And then also because it is, I think it must be stainless steel. It doesn't, or maybe the pin that they give you is stainless steel. I'm not sure actually, but it doesn't rust and it doesn't get all goopy and stuck in there. Sometimes what happens is adhesive, for me at least, works really well the first time I use it, and then it's kind of downhill from there because it either gets dried up in the neck of the bottle, or the pin that I stuck in there gets rusty and gross, or or the whole thing dries out. I used to live in Arizona, and my liquid adhesive would dry out all the time. Adhesive failure was like my number one problem in any kind of paper crafting, whether it was a dry adhesive or a liquid adhesive. It just didn't work very well. I now live in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, and that is a really typically more of a humid area, and so it works out better for most of my adhesives to not dry out. Now, as you saw, I dropped that on there and the glue smudged inside, but you know what? Don't worry about it if that happens to you, because you're going to be putting down some additional adhesive in a little bit. So let that dry, and then you're going to cut out, and the reason, this is why it didn't matter how sloppy a colorer you are, then you're going to cut around the outside part of this little layered colored die cut, because you don't need that extra edge. Plus it's, as you can see, it looks just terrible. So you don't want that. I'm going to cut that out. Now, as you probably noticed, and I missed, I did not have this little bit colored in. I think I must have turned my die cut around or something from where I was tracing with the pencil, because I can see the pencil marks under here. And if I had been more careful, probably would have taken an eraser and erased all that. But it's okay. So anyway, so that's all colored in. And now I'm going to use, I don't even know if Ranger or Ink Essentials makes glossy accents any longer. I have this bottle. It's probably pretty old, but it had never been opened, so I'm hoping it's still good. So anyway, something like glossy accents. Judykins has a glossy glue. I've also used the Spellbinders Card Shop Essential Glaze and Glue. That works really nicely. And what you're going to do then is just fill in these little channels or troughs or sunken areas. I don't really know what to call them. And insets maybe with the glossy accents or whatever glossy glue you might have. And you fill all that in. And you try not to get it on top of the white cardstock if you can. If if you get a little bit there, you can try to wipe it off, or if it's just a tiny bit, I'd probably leave it. Like these tiny little holes here, I'm definitely going to get some on the top there because it's difficult for me to get really deep into that without going over the edges. Okay, and then you let that dry for quite a while. You want to let it really harden on there before you try to use it in a project. So here's the one that I did before, and I must have used the lighter color of the green on the outside here. And this one I did do with the Spellbinders glaze and glue. And so you can tell because it's an alcohol marker, it does go through to the back side. So it is recommended when you use alcohol markers to put a piece of paper or something underneath there so you don't ruin your surface, your work surface. My work mat is kind of messy, so it's okay. But I will come back and show you what I ended up doing with those two.
Okay, so I ended up using some glitter cardstock from my stash. I think it's from Tonic Studios. And the Hugs die comes from Catherine Pooler. And I made it a top fold card. And I like how glittery it is with the glossy, basically an embellishment from the Decorative Enamels die. And there we have it. So thank you so much for stopping by. This is Beverly from scrapandthread.blogspot.com. If you have any questions, leave me a comment. Take care.